Hey everyone, this is the first painting live stream. I'm going to have to mute myself or I will hear myself echoing. Um, so we'll see how this goes. This is the first time I've ever live streamed myself painting anything. I've got a camera set up kind of pointing down at my Cintiq here. So we'll just go with it and see. You guys can ask questions and I'll answer them as I get to them. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to be working. I don't know how much I can talk and work at the same time. So let me know if the audio quality is good or bad or probably horrible, or video quality or anything else for that matter. I had to mess around with some of the settings earlier this morning. Hopefully it worked out the kinks, but yeah, it's kind of funky to set this stuff up on Mac. Yeah, what you're seeing on the screen is me working on a Cintiq down here, and that's actually getting mirrored on the stream. So what you're seeing happen should probably be in sync with what you see me drawing, but unfortunately I can't actually show the cursor in a very effective way on the screen capture. So maybe that'll be for the next stream. I'll figure something out there. So yeah, what I'm working on is basically weapon materials, primarily for melee weapons. So right now I've only got metals kind of up and running. I'm eventually going to get to stone and things like wood for hammers and whatnot. So adding some space in here so I can do some other sword variants, because after some work on the randomization properties today, I realized that I probably need to, well, add some more, I guess what we might call textures for each sword material type, or just generally metal material type. So I'm going to duplicate couple of these so that we can have 5 grades, and we'll see how much of this actually sticks. But what I'm trying to do is basically like standardize the material colors for any given weapon, and then I'm going to be setting up a Photoshop action so that we can draw a weapon once, paint it in grayscale, and then you basically just use an action to apply colors for various material types to that weapon. So, and yeah, I'm probably not going to be excellent at talking at the same time that I work. So if I sound kind of like stuttery and don't make any sense, well, it's just because I can't chew gum and walk at the same time, essentially, or in this case, draw and talk at the same time. So this is all in Photoshop, by the way. I use that pretty much exclusively for all the graphics for Delver's Drop. If you have any questions about sort of technical stuff or anything else, just let me know. But you know, in the randomized system for Delvers, we're going to be having several grades and materials for weapons. So I was trying to figure out earlier today kind of how do we combine those things, you know, what kind of constitutes a grade versus a material. So, you know, rusty is sort of technically could be a grade for a weapon, but of course like rust only affects certain types of metals. So it makes more sense to put rust as essentially a material type, and then we have grades being sort of like how kind of well made or refined is this weapon. So so what I'm working on right now are kind of grades for a common metal material type for the sword. So you see this kind of base, just like giant chunk of ore that I have. I painted one of these blocks as just a kind of building block object for the rooms, and then went kind of crazy and basically, you know, just paint bucketed that original block with a bunch of different colors for different types of metals. So it looks kind of rainbowy when you're viewing them all together. But I mean, since we don't really have kind of true like, well, shading or material settings like you would in a 3D system, or and we don't even really use gradients in the game, and can't do things like a reflective sheen and whatnot. We have to actually just paint the reflectivity of a metal onto the weapon itself. So that stuff is static. It would just be too expensive to actually animate things like a reflection or sheen, kind of like playing across the blade. Maybe someday, if we're able to introduce masking into the engine, that would be a possibility, but not right now. So yeah, let me label these so I can keep myself straight and you guys can know what I'm doing here. So in the randomized system, we're basically going to have these tiers. We'll probably have 10 tiers, but I'm just going to boil it down to 5 because it would, again, be sort of too costly to draw 10 sort of variants of every single weapon type. So we're going to have a kind of corroded or just generally crap weapon. Then we will have a sort of an average, or you could say dull variant. And then we'll have a good and sharp variant. These aren't the real terms that we'll use. Like, there will be random terms that kind of fit into these categories. So we might actually have a randomized term that gets pulled into a weapon that's generated that's the crap broadsword of bludgeoning or whatever. But these are just kind of like shorthand for me right now. That all that stuff is in a separate spreadsheet. Let's see, Chris Guest was asking about the sword designs at the bottom. Yeah, I can zoom out. I think the ones you probably saw, these were some old swords that we had done, and I'm basically taking, so this one is just a random color test. Kobe actually liked it, and I think it's pretty cool too. It's sort of like an iridescent magic looking sword. And this was going to be the base kind of like, grayscale blade, and then like a different colored kind of hilt area, so that we could paint bucket stuff into those. These were some that a contractor painted, and I'm trying to kind of work some of, I actually really liked his colors, so this would kind of be like the crap version, dull colors, and then sharp. So and these right here were actually the original swords that I had painted way back during, I think it was for like the very first PAX that we went to almost a year ago. It's kind of crazy to think that we've been working on this for a year now. So yeah, this would again be sort of like the corroded, crappy version, a sort of dull variant possibly. And but these, I mean, the colors are more like material colors. So that's the tricky thing to, that I've got to sort of sort out as I'm doing this. And actually, since we're talking about weapons, I'll give you a little tease here of a few different swords I've been cooking up. So I worked on writing a giant list of weapons, different types of swords and staffs and axes and all of that sort of thing. The crap version looked cool. Yeah, actually, I really like the sort of purple with the orange areas on it here. Like that's a really nice kind of way to do rust. Like it was kind of better than what I was working on here, because that's a bit more detail. I think the trickiest thing is just figuring out, because it'll be really tough to paint. For all the variants we want to have, it would just be impossible cost-wise to have someone sit down and paint. Here's more like orange rust on any given weapon. So painting all this stuff for every single material variant and sword type and so on is just like insane. So yeah, trying to figure out how to standardize that. I got some blob of color in there. Okay, got rid of that. Sorry if this probably all the panning and zooming and stuff is kind of chaotic. I use shortcuts a ton if you are sort of watching my keyboard hand. So it's since I'm like on the clock right now and trying to get work done, I'm not gonna like slow down for sort of ease of viewing. So I'll just apologize for that, I guess. Rusted weapons should totally have tetanus status effect. I like that a lot. Um, so, but actually, the lowest grade weapons, the sort of tier one, will actually. The idea is they hurt you in some way. So, like they're basically cursed. I guess would be a way to look at it. So if you used the mangler here, this guy. I don't know if you can read my chicken scratch handwriting or can see at this resolution, but yeah, the mangler is basically just a blade with some kind of tape or gauze wrapped around it. So you'd be gripping just like raw metal with a little bit of cloth on top, and so it'd probably hurt your hand, and you would take a little bit of damage every time you used it. So maybe better than nothing, or if you have a ton of potions, maybe it's good to use, but you probably want to just like toss it at the enemy. So similarly for the butter blade, you slip and cut yourself, maybe 1 in 10 times. We haven't really worked out the total system for this, so some of this is subject to potential kind of cutting room floor, but yeah. So we've got the mangler, the butter blade, the spur, which is basically just a kind of chunk of metal that's been fashioned into a sword-like shape. And then we've got a just regular blade, a short sword, machete, dirk, and saber. So one thing you can tell if you look at my guides here, the bottom guide is for basically where the character's hand would go. So so between the two guides, so like this would be a character's gloved hand, like so. So that's just a guide for myself because the guard, this piece here, will sit over the hand, as will the pommel. Just because of how we have to set up our graphics and layering and everything. But the way this is designed is I could do some kind of a guard on here like this, and the hand still sits inside of that. So we'll do some cool stuff like that eventually, but I'm not really working those in yet because I want those to be like the more kind of specialized weapons, or have some random properties get applied that modify the guard to add extra damage or whatever. So anyway, back to actual work. So tier 4 would be extra damage, and these are the ones that I basically decided I just need to draw these because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it with a separate graphic overlay, since the swords are going to increase in range as you get better swords. So this would be something like so. So unfortunately we may have to draw this for every individual weapon, but as long as we draw it once and all the colors get applied automatically, then we're going to save a lot of work that way. So I'm kind of okay with doing a serrated blade version of some of these. And then number 5 would be a special tier. So this would be, basically the sort of perfect godlike version of the sword. So got to get rid of these little crevices and crappy edges and whatnot. And then we would probably have some kind of fluting. So I'm going to do something like this. And maybe we should do some kind of not a crack or a crevice, but like a designed notching, just to make it look cool. So I kind of like that. And actually, to keep this kind of perfect, I'm probably just going to draw one side and flip it to make it symmetrical. Um, so I'm reading the question about the UI with multiple elemental enchantments. Yeah, it will most likely be possible to have multiple elements added to a weapon. So some of them could be major, like you could have a flame hilt that, I don't know, shoots fireballs out of the tip of the sword or something crazy like that, if we can accommodate that. And then it might do like minor lightning damage or whatever. Um, so so yeah, like the major stuff, like if you're doing something as crazy as like you touch the enemy with the sword and they explode into fire, then we would probably change a major part of the graphic out. Like, I might do kind of a flaming variant of this hilt for that purpose, so you can see really obviously, like, okay, if I whack someone with this, they're going to catch on fire and run around burning the level down or whatever. Okay, not really, that's an exaggeration, but yeah, for minor stuff, we would, if you just do a little bit of extra fire damage, we would probably just throw a particle effect on it. So you've got like little bits of flame kind of licking off of just any common sword, if it has just a tiny bit of flame enchantment or whatever. So yeah, the idea is to try as much as possible to visually communicate everything on the graphic of the sword itself with as much kind of work for us or as little work for us, sorry, as possible. Just because, I mean, doing all of this is very time consuming. So, yeah, something like that. I don't know. Not sure if I like that or not, but could be kind of fun. Let's expand that a little bit. Okay, let's try flipping it and seeing how it looks. Sorry, my throat is kind of sore today for some reason, so I feel like I'm just mumbling. Well, that was the wrong thing to do. Horizontal. And I'm just doing that through the menu. Sorry, I just have one screen mapped for the stream, because I actually use the Cintiq plus a couple of extra monitors to just run like menus and extra panels and things like that. So, and this was not bought with Kickstarter money. This is my own personal stuff that I've sort of amassed over the course of doing freelance work and everything else over the last several years. So, sorry, reading the comments again. Yeah, the special kind of Kickstarter item packs are going to have, well, what would normally be kind of random properties that get applied to a weapon, but these won't be randomized. We're going to kind of specially design a weapon, so it'll use a similar naming convention. Like, one of the packs was I forget if it ended up being glimmering or glittering. Weapon pack was kind of the ultimate version. So basically, we would have you might be able to get very early on, or possibly get immediately from the shop or something like that. That part we haven't like completely figured out exactly like if you can you buy them from the shop? Do you get them for free instantly? Do they just become available in your game? Those are kind of things that we've discussed, and I don't think we ever reached a resolution on it, but yeah, they would be weapons with kind of special parameters similar to the other random parameters that only show up if you back at certain tiers, or share them through the kind of sharing system that we're going to devise sometime next year. So, hope that answers the question. Let's see. So the DPI that I'm working at is actually 1152, so 16 times standard screen resolution at 72 DPI. So we, because we wanted to paint everything at higher resolution, I guess I'll just explain the reasoning. So for one thing, these are going to be high enough resolution that we could, as long as they're cleaned up enough, show them in an art book or on our website, or basically in any kind of area that we wanted to, any venue. By having these super high res versions originally, rather than trying to scale up pixel art and having it look crappy or whatever. So that was one reason, and another was, because we want to support a pretty wide range of devices, we have two different texture sets, and so I wanted to make sure that we could kind of paint things at this higher res, scale down to any of those texture sets, and look really good. But then also, if you paint at high enough res, like you can see, I've got all kinds of mistakes in here and some pixelation and kind of nasty fill areas and things like that. But when you zoom out enough, you don't see any of that. So it actually kind of lets us be a little bit sloppy with the painting in some ways, and then it just sort of glosses over the mistakes. Especially like if we were doing a more painterly kind of fuzzy style, you could basically these things wouldn't be mistakes. Like we could have little imperfections like this, and it's just part of the texture. But since we wanted this really clean style, it makes sense to paint it at a high resolution, scale it down, and it's just incredibly sharp. Yeah, so in terms of like scaling graphics, we only ever scale down. We never scale up, and yeah, we can. I forget what the lowest we can support is. I think it's like 640 by, whatever the original or previous iPhone res was. I start forgetting all that stuff. I have a spreadsheet to help me remember. So I think I'm pretty happy with these. So now I just need to do the color versions. The trick is going to be getting the the shiny version of the sword to look even shinier in the kind of higher grade variants. So fortunately I can kind of reuse most of the paint job I did before, and I'm just going to, well, either make this version look a little bit shinier or make the previous version look slightly more dull. Although really, like for the extra damage, I guess I don't have to do too much just because it's really just changing the design and the material doesn't need to look all that much shinier. But on the kind of ultimate, the tier 5 special version, I would probably want a bit of like special kind of reflectivity, which is actually kind of hard to paint if you're just doing this kind of flat color look. Let's see. Build Gearbox is asking if there's an alpha and beta. Right now we're just doing closed kind of alpha beta access for Kickstarter backers, but we may do an open beta at some point. Let's see. Oh, the buying the art book. Yeah, we're going to have an art book that's distributed as part of the Kickstarter rewards at the end of this year, but I will probably print extra copies and sell them on our website at some point, kind of after all the Kickstarter orders go out. So, okay, so this is going pretty well. I'm also, as I'm working, kind of thinking about how hard is it going to be to, draw this for a few, and draw and paint this sort of stuff for potentially a few hundred weapon types in the end. I don't know if the game will launch with all of those, but that's the plan that I'd like to achieve. So I'm trying to monitor like how quickly this goes, kind of in my head, to make sure it's not completely ridiculous. So let's see. Now I've got to figure out how to make this look kind of corroded. Without making it look totally like rust, but I'll probably have to introduce another color here. Let's try this. And for some reason my tolerance settings aren't... Oh, I had anti-alias turned off. That would help. So, yeah, so for the corroded or crap version, I'm just trying to put some gunk on it in a few places. Don't want to overdo it though. And then I probably want to tone down the degree of shininess. So I'm probably just going to get rid of those brighter color sections. I think this is actually going a little better than I anticipated it might. Let's add that in. Nah, I don't like that. We'll try that. Yeah, that's better. The other tricky thing is trying to paint everything in such a way that when you zoom out, it still appears sharp, because it's really easy to add so much detail that you can't actually see what's going on. Or just trying to keep contrast high. Like I kind of wonder about doing this sort of thing to make the sword pop a little bit more. That would actually reduce the workload a little bit because we're eliminating a color. So I might go ahead and do that. So I'm actually progressively darkening each of these a little bit. So just kind of increasing the contrast from one to the next. Let's turn that up a little bit. Yeah, that's a little better. So we want to 100% fill that that work? Apparently I had contiguous turned off. Well, that's annoying. Yeah, I think I got off there somewhere. Okay, I think I got it that time. What color am I missing here? That? Nope. That? Do I not use that on this sword? I guess maybe I didn't. Sorry. Sometimes it's annoying double checking this stuff. So apparently I didn't use one of these colors on this sword. I thought that I would have. Nope, I guess I did not. So let's change that because I think we need a little more subtlety here. I'll try filling this zone with that color. Yeah, it looks a little more shiny. Yeah, that's slightly better. I'm finding that painting shiny stuff is one of the greater challenges in this project. Because we aren't doing gradients. I mean, I know these kind of look shiny enough in isolation, but they don't look terribly shiny when you put them next to other objects in the game, unless you have like actual kind of like a light effect on them or particles or something to make them kind of look like the light is reflecting and bouncing around. Like that a little better. I'm going to save this as a new version so I can go back to the old one if I need to reference anything. Let me catch up on some comments while that saves. What's here is the art book. I think it was $120. So yeah, Chris guessed the vector and raster thing. This is all raster, but we actually, like, one of our contractors actually works using vector shapes in Photoshop, and they usually meld up pretty well. I think. I mean, the difference is like sometimes you get a little more like curvature with the vector shapes than if you're painting it intentionally, but. Hi Nipsting, one of the Spine developers. We have some feedback to send you, but it's we just need to get around to writing an email. But yeah, Spine has been great so far. It's actually really helped us get some things into the game and keep our textures highly efficient. So thanks Swoop for the compliments, even though you haven't heard of the game before. Corroded crap be the title of a rusty sword. Possibly. I mean, we could have I guess it would be like the corroded crap short sword. That's probably that will probably actually happen. Maybe not literally, but very close to that. Hacking hatchet of flaming hackery. That's probably possible too. So just for fun here, because I need to go get some more water, I will just throw some weapon kind of name randomization on this screen really quick. Sorry, I've got to pull it from my other monitor. I have a kind of hacky random test that I run in our Google spreadsheet. So basically, if you read from left to right, this is sort of a possible name for something. It wouldn't have this many terms, and the terms are not filtered at all. So you've got, like Fury Rune would apply maybe only to wands, and then you've got, the Fury Rune darting. Like darting would actually be typically apply to like a melee weapon. So this isn't like it isn't really a true test of what names would be in the game. But it's what I use to kind of like skim through really quick and see if the naming order looks reasonable. But just to be clear, so we would only pick probably like 3 modifiers onto the base weapon name. So it could be the Oaken Tripling Flechette of Flummoxing, or we could do the Alchemist's Deadly Fraying Flayers. So I don't know if that could be a real name or not. Some of these I forget like what category they even apply to. Yeah. So and then I can actually re-randomize, but if I just tap something else into that cell, or it should work anyway. There we go. So yeah, sorry, Google Docs kind of catching up. So yeah, I'm gonna go get some more water and let you all look at that for a second, since I'm sure this is interesting to like 2 people. Who did the naming? I did a decent bit of the naming, and then our contractor who does a lot of our writing, I sort of tasked her with coming up with a bunch of other names. So I can show you some weapon names in just a second. So yeah, the Needler, I believe, is a type of rapier. And let's see, the Deceptive Deadly Jeweler's Tombbuster of Sprinting. Those probably wouldn't actually all go together, but I do like it. So let me re-randomize here so we can see a few more. And this isn't even the full list. And sorry, the weapon kind of randomized system in my spreadsheet at least doesn't work very well because there's a bunch of blank space, so it doesn't actually fill all of these cells up right now. So basically, I would have to either come up with a ton of other weapons to fill these empty cells, or redo the formula so it only pulls. Anyway, who cares about spreadsheets except me? Probably no one. So so let's look at the weapons list. Okay, so this is a bunch of this stuff is subject to cuts. So let's just, I'm gonna kind of hide some of this. We'll scoot over to swords. You can see I came up with way too many actual weapon types. So we'll just do short swords and rapiers. So you can see the first category, or the sort of 0 or 1 tier, would be the backfiring. These damage you, and faulty, kind of in the same category, but not quite as bad. Maybe it only damages you like 10% of the time. So yeah, the Mangler and the Butterblade that I drew on that other sheet would fall into that backfiring category, and so I'll just kind of scroll down here. So, yeah, so there's some sample weapon names. So yeah, we and yeah, the air guitar would be kind of a I guess a bit of a joke weapon, but yes, for the bard. But we will probably put some of it, every weapon type we can squeeze into the builds coming up. So we'll ideally we start adding like a new weapon type every with every sort of new build that comes out, or adding a few weapons to a pre-existing category. So at some point we'll add the instruments category, which yes would be the primary weapon for the bard, but until let's say we never add the bard, we're still going to have bard weapons because any class can use any weapon, they just can't use them very effectively. So you'd be able to use an instrument, but you might break it after a few tries. So that's why I wanted to come up with that kind of full list of every essentially every weapon type I could possibly think of, and we want to do some that are like fun and crazy, like the names you guys were pulling, but then and the air guitar, but then a decent number that are serious, and actually pulled from history or kind of real weaponsmithing. So like the Scramasax and the Cincadea, or however that's supposed to be pronounced. I've never really known, and I should probably look up how to pronounce that. I think I used to see it in Final Fantasy games and call it a Cincadia, but I'm pretty sure that's incorrect. So I want to make this look pretty rough and nasty. We'll get rid of that kind of center line and just make it look very rickety. That's probably pretty good. So if by Chris guess, if you mean like new content, kind of as in expansion packs, then yeah, ideally we would add some new weapons with each expansion pack. So right now I want to come up with a list that is, probably more than we could ever pull off. So we have ideas to pull from in the future, and right now we can choose to just do 10 instead of 20, and then later we have all these options to just quickly add in if we can. So actually, I now need to apply the colors that I changed around to this guy. So I've paint bucketed this stuff so many times it's starting to get pretty rough around the edges. You can see these kind of nasty aliased areas, but those will all go away. Like this is actually just going to end up being a color guide and kind of a painting style guide. So one weapon will actually look like this. Like this is technically the dirk, but I sort of squished it. But I'm going to supply our artists with this as a guide, and so then they can go to town and paint the every other weapon in this category in a very similar way. So really the only kind of painting difference between, say, a dirk and a like a straight up short sword would really just be the shape of its blade and possibly its hilt. So, but actually, if you look here, I actually reused the short sword's hilt for the dirk. So the dirk is actually a little longer than it looks like in this file. I just squished it down so I'd have room to paint. Although I'm kind of liking the way this looks, so I may make a shorter kind of version in here, which I think that this might actually look like a Cincadea. Not sure. I always I feel like I know more names of kind of weapons than actually what they're supposed to really look like, because I mostly know them from video games as opposed to actual research. But I tend to try to do a decent bit of research into real world weapons and mythology and things like that whenever I'm working on a project. So Unfortunately, I just don't have much time to do that, so I'm kind of relying on our writing contractor, Renee, or I may actually have a friend help me come up with some of these names too. So, okay, I think that's working out pretty well. So if I zoom back, you can see a pretty clear gradation from one to the next. I think I need to amp up the rustiness of this one, though. And yeah, you can upload whatever you want to the forums. I mean, if we're kind of leaking stuff here, just put some notes that say like some of it is subject to cuts, because this is like the stuff I'm showing on the live stream is all like very kind of raw. Hasn't gone through any culling process, so. And let's see, since I'm at this stage, I'm gonna quickly paint some stuff for the hilt here, or even though I guess you can call the hilt of a sword a haft. It doesn't sound as correct, but I did some looking, and so technically a haft I think can refer to, I guess, the part you hang on to for just about any weapon. So since we're using spine and we need to kind of to code name some things for the spine skeletons, I decided to call the. Am I coloring on the wrong layer? Dang it. So yeah, basically the part between the grip and the blade or whatever for every weapon, I'm just going to call the haft as an easy shorthand, and the blade is going to be called the effector in code and spine and whatnot, because not every weapon will have a blade, obviously. So the effector for a bow would actually be the arrows that you load into that bow, and the effector for a wand would probably be the tip of the wand, and so on. So that's one way that we're kind of doing the randomization, is that you have all these categories, and each category relates to one part of the weapon. So the effector, or the butt, which would be the pommel on a sword, or the haft, which for like. I should probably just come up with a better kind of more general code name, but I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. So the haft on a bow for us is actually going to be like the arms of the bow. So so these parts, and then this would be the grip, and then the string would be just something else, and then the effector would be the arrow. So I don't know if anyone cares to know that stuff, but that's basically how the randomization system is going to work. Is that you're going to have these categories. So so like you'll have an effector category, which will always apply to, essentially the just what type of weapon is it. So short sword applies to the effector, and there's a default hilt essentially that comes with it. But if you add another random term like the bludgeoning short sword or whatever, then you'll actually get you might get a different guard and hilt area that get swapped in. So each of the terms actually will typically apply to a specific component of the weapon. And I was just talking to Kobe today, trying to kind of standardize some of that stuff, because it just gets really, really tricky to plan. It's basically like trying to plan a 10-dimensional system in 2 dimensions, because I've got spreadsheets, and that's about it to do the planning. Spreadsheets in my brain.
Well, there is an animation for it, but there's currently no data-wise to link that up. There's nothing.
So yeah, the air guitar wouldn't have a blade. The effector on an instrument would probably, I don't know, it would, like on a guitar, the effector could either be the neck or the body, I suppose. One of those would be the effector and one would be the haft in our system. But again, that's just like code names, I guess.
No, it should never have worked post-fact build. So yeah, I don't know what Debbie can do about that room in particular. If you wanted to, I would keep this listed in here, and you can denote, and I would, as you're going through here and doing these, put a little indicator.
As far as internships and that kind of thing, yeah, that would actually be awesome if we had time at some point. The only problem is it's way easier to do that stuff in person. So I would be open to it, or if anyone, if anyone around would like to do some contract art, I would definitely be open to chatting with them about that, and finding out what their rates are and everything. But we do kind of have a bank of contractors that's, I think, more or less set right now, and kind of in line with our budget and stuff. But yeah, I would love to work with some people and do some internships and that sort of thing. I guess it would really just require us to get a little more set in terms of just like, well, what does the future hold for us in general, Hopefully Delvers does amazingly, and we can do whatever we want. But who knows if that's going to happen. So right now I'm applying it's basically a color blend mode layer set to overlay that does some color modification to these hilts.
I'd say, tell you what, if you want to.
So I'll just keep the good and the extra damage versions the same, and then we'll do something slightly fancier with this, the amazing version. Make it super shiny. I need to fill this for reference. Actually, I need to probably reverse that order. So this palette off to the side, I'm trying to keep consistent with, basically here are all of the colors that I'm using. So I actually need to add that rusty kind of color too. And the reason for that is when I set up the action, what I'm actually going to do is in a separate file, I will, if I'm basically doing the bronzy version of this, I will have the action just basically do a non-contiguous fill of that color on the weapon. So it's going to essentially just do something like this, and ta-da, you've got a new weapon color. And if because the action isn't going to know where the color is on the blade itself, I've got to have this standardized palette kind of off to the side here. Wondering about changing that color a little bit. Yeah, I kind of like that slightly more like golden orangey color a little bit better. So, mess with that.
I don't care what method you use. This to me is a little bit easier to just do a whole bunch of them at once. But if you have an idea for something, by all means, shoot it. Name them linear. Google Doc. Pseudo language. I'm familiar with this from before. I just like learning more from the language now. It's a cool dance. Cool red-headed dance. Is that computer on? Yeah.
Sorry, don't want to interrupt your Full Sail class. So added a couple little dings, additional dents to the dull sword. So now I've basically got the just the final one to do. Actually, let's add, I'll just do a slightly different color for this hilt. Yeah, that's kind of nice. So, yeah, the good tier 3 and the tier 4, I'm probably just going to keep with the same, almost identical coloring scheme. The only change that occurs is the way the blade looks. I think that'll actually be okay. Saves us a bit of time. I mean, basically, like keeping the coloring the same compensates for doing a slightly different drawing of that blade. I mean, the goal would be to basically, like, you know, draw the weapon once, like I would just draw the good or sharp version, and then like duplicate that in either direction, draw some well, dents and stuff on the dull version, and then some extra doodads on the super special version, and run the action and call it a day. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. I think I need another color for this guy. So let's break this out. That's kind of nice, the color that I had on the original block here. So we will, I think, just use that. Yeah, so I'm probably going to shadow this side so it looks like a groove, and make the other side lighter so it pops. Not sure if that's the color I want or not. Well, it's about the only color I have. Or, you know, maybe, actually what I'll probably do is extend the color overlay from the haft or the hilt here into this area. We'll see how that looks. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So hopefully I'll be able to set it up in such a way that the action can apply the color to both. Because in the end, these are actually going to have to be separate graphics. Like there will be a where we will take this sort of thing and like split it into, like, the blade as one sprite, the guard as a sprite, and the grip and pommel as separate sprites as well. So this sword would be 4 individual pieces, or if you had other random parameters added to it, could be up to 5 or 6 or so different pieces with other things kind of attached to it. And, oh yeah, we're in Springfield. If anyone's in the area or comes to the area, you can come by and take a tour of the office or whatever, as long as you okay it with us first. Surprise visits would be maybe a little more difficult, especially if we're, say, delivering a milestone, but but you would probably know about that anyway. Yeah, and then we've actually had a and we'll probably have another 1 or 2 of these sort of just get-togethers at a local pub called Brewco. Just hang out with people, show the game off. We did one of those right when the Kickstarter ended, kind of advertised it on Facebook. So had a decent number of people show up from the area, or from, like, even as far as St. Louis and so on. So that was really nice. I might actually make the edge look a little thinner on this one to make it seem even more sharp. I'll have to zoom out and make sure that kind of jives with the art style, though. Let's see, because I don't want to make details so small that they look more like more finely detailed than everything else. Sorry, I got a phone call. I just hung up on my girlfriend for you guys, so so you better appreciate this. I'll call her back. Oh, in Lebanon, yeah. I always forget where Lebanon is. Well, Lebanon, Missouri, not Lebanon, the country. That's and of course we pronounce it wrong. I think I'm pretty sure everyone does, like Lebanon and Haiti, which is spelled just like Haiti, but everyone in Missouri calls it Haiti. Yeah, I mean, I think that looks pretty good. Seems a little finely detailed, so I might have to chunk that up a little bit, but this is the first kind of fancy sword that I've drawn. So let's try slightly widening this whole thing. Oh, that's good to know. Nipsing. We yeah, I like I mentioned before, we actually like have some suggestions and some questions we were meaning to send you guys, and in amongst all the animating, just have not had time to pin the email. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be doing any animating. Like I haven't really done much animation at all because there's so much drawing to be done. So I don't know that I could really even tell you off the top of my head. I know that what would be nice is the ability to, because a lot of times we have multiple skeletons in the same file. So like for the rogue, we're actually using a skeleton for the torso, for the head, and then one for each arm. And we did that partly so that, well, so that we could conserve some animation time and like reuse the same head for every attack state. And then also for some layering and a bunch of stuff like that. But it would actually be super convenient if we could have like a master kind of animation toggle where basically you could tell all skeletons at once, like, hey, everybody turn on your attack whatever animation, or actually like a group of animation states. Like if you I know this would probably be kind of complicated to design in the software, but it's I come from more from like a Flash background. And so, in Flash, you would have a movie clip, and you could, in that movie clip, like load in essentially like any kind of skeletons and animation states you wanted, and sort of like group them together. So that would actually be really nice, is the ability to like say group several skeletons and tell them like, okay, everybody play like this state for like, I mean, let's say we've got the slashing attack. We actually want the head to play its attacking general state, the arm to play slashing, the shield to play its attacking general, and then the body to play like a 45 rotation. So it's actually even more complicated than saying that we need everybody, all these skeletons to play their attack. It's like it actually has to be a pre-designed group where we say like, okay, I want you to play slash, and then all the skeletons refer to their associated animation state for that kind of meta animation state. I don't know if I'm explaining super well, but I know that is one thing that would be super convenient for us. Yeah, Vacant I actually really agree. Like, Flash as a platform, I mean, well, both like hasn't necessarily kept up with the times, but also kind of got shafted by various platform holders. Because iPhone could have supported Flash, but they chose not to because of, well, they say stability, but I think it was actually a ploy to force games to be put on the App Store rather than distributing games via Flash on the internet and just being able to play, go to some website and play a free Flash game on your phone. And there are probably other reasons too, but I think it was much more of a kind of political angle in the way that Apple did things, or like based their choices on. So, but yeah, I mean, Flash, the development environment, the IDE, is actually one of my sort of favorite software packages. I don't use it anymore because, we aren't doing that anymore. But we actually, in the very original infancy of the company, we were working on a Flash engine and planning on trying to make basically Facebook Flash games. So that's probably a little known fact. It's actually a fact I forget fairly frequently because we have gone so far afield and don't even think about Flash these days. Because once Kobe started working on the this version of the engine, to run games on PC, Mac, iPhone, et cetera, and possibly port to consoles someday. It just, there was no reason to even look at Flash anymore. Which if we could use Flash as some kind of an integrated environment with, animation and callbacks and things like that, that would be really awesome. But hopefully, as Spine continues to develop, it might actually kind of take that place in terms of like the sort of development tools we need. So, I guess callbacks would be another thing, like the ability to put a comment on a certain frame of animation and have it send a message to the code saying like, hey, this is the point where the gun is firing, so Kobe knows exactly. Kobe gets code essentially that tells him like, fire the projectile at this point in the animation. Where right now he's, I think, just timing it off of well, just usually he opens up spine and says and looks in it and says, oh, on the timeline, frame 20 is where it looks like the gun should go off, and so that's when I'm going to emit my projectile, and hard codes it somewhere or puts it in a database somewhere. So so yeah, callbacks could be a really awesome addition to spine at some point. And I think I'm probably about ready to wrap this guy up. Let's reapply that color. So that was kind of nice having this gold inlay sort of thing. So yeah, Nimsing will definitely send you an email at some point. Let's see. Sorry, I'm catching up with some comments here. Oh, thanks for the comments on the sheen on the blade. I'm fairly happy with how these turned out too. Like, I think it does seem like a fairly clear progression from crappy to excellent. I probably need to make that last version have a bit more sheen. Like, it looks kind of dark after adding the groove. So I'll see if I can do something about that in just a second. Oh, event timeline? I don't know about this event timeline in Spine. That would be nice. So, oh yeah, the stones, these kind of like metal cubes all around this file are really like I basically just made a stone or kind of metalish cube for the levels. So it's this was the base for some of the pushable blocks, and so I painted this texture on, and I was like, oh, like, why don't I just use this as a template? So I don't know what the original even was at this point. It was probably something like this iron one, or maybe this dual bronze, I don't know. So I took it and duplicated a bunch, did color, just like paint bucket fills, essentially, to get all these different colors. So these are essentially all of the, close to all of the materials, or at least metal materials in the Delver's Drop world. So I've still got to do wood and stone and some other stuff like that, but there will probably be more metals than anything else. Like, I mean, that you can only, it's a little bit harder to come up with different kind of grades of wood, like polished oak. What does polished oak look like compared to regular oak? I don't know. I don't want to paint it, but it's pretty fun coming up with these different metals. And yeah, we built these desks for our office a few months ago, and it's pretty awesome. So they're actually convertible. I can lower this desk to be a sitting desk if I wanted to, but I have this little IKEA kind of stool chair that I sit in sometimes, and my legs are getting tired, so I'm going to do that now. So. Grayish and bluish, like over maybe these, the kind of gray purple. Those are various forms of iron. So we've got rusted iron down here, all the reds and oranges, and then regular iron, which is just kind of a purplish, dingy gray. But then we have what I'm calling bite iron, which is essentially just like it's like a hardened kind of version of iron. It isn't really based on anything in the real world. There's probably something like that, but I just thought it would be cool to make this purple-ish metal. And then meteorite, which would basically be like lodestone ore or something like that. So it's really just a shinier version of iron, which would have some kind of magic property or something. I don't even really know yet. Then we've got steel swords over here. So I haven't actually done the coloring on the blades yet, but we would have magisteel, which would be kind of like the basically mithril steel, hardened steel, or I might just call it bite steel, and then blackened steel or something like gunmetal. So what parameters these will have, I'm not even sure yet. And not all weapons will use them, obviously. Like some will, like guns might only use steel, for instance, or something like that. And so it's nice to have a few variants. So swords might not actually get every one of these applied to them. Sorry, I wasn't reading. Middle column down near the bottom. So these maybe? I forget that you can't see my cursor. So the kind of green and blue, possibly? Yeah. Okay, yeah, those are just different versions of corrosion. So those are going to get kind of applied to basically what I did on this corroded crap version of the common metal sword. I'll just have a dull bronze sword with some kind of green and blue corrosion applied to it. So it's basically like if you see, a bronze statue with the kind of like cool turquoise drippiness running off of it. That's what that's for. So you probably wouldn't see a totally like teal block anywhere. That's just a color reference for me. And then if anyone missed this, we've got this cool kind of iridescent looking sword. I don't even know what material that is. I just did it as a test. So, and it turned out pretty nice somehow. It's really just because I did like palette kind of color cycling, like going from red to purple to blue to green as you go from dark to light, which is a fairly typical pixel art type of trick, or really just painting trick in general. And I think I'm going to just erase the inside line here so that I can just paint it, extend these edges a little bit. I don't know, I'm beginning to think that maybe enlarging this groove wasn't the best idea. It starts just looking so chunky, it looks like you take up part of the blade with the groove, and it almost makes it look damaged or something instead of decorated the way I wanted it to. So I'll just trim that down a little. In the end, I should probably just make this a color on the blade itself. So, yeah, that's better. I think I'm actually pretty happy with that. It looks more detailed than the other versions, but I'm not sure really what to do to get around that if you're going to do any decoration. Unless I just do this, which might be the best option. and just make it look like the interior of the blade is flat instead of coming to a ridge at the center. And I know this is probably taking longer than it should, but I'm trying to develop this system so that I can kind of pass it off to other artists and be like, hey, paint it like this. So the upfront problem solving always takes a little bit longer. I think that is going to work out much more nicely. So let's take these colors and I will just get rid of this overlay because it's driving me nuts and fill this with the actual color instead. So, well, let's try doing that. I think that actually works better. I probably should have kept a state to back up to, but actually I kind of like how that looks, pairing those two colors with each other. So let's try something here. Basically a super high contrast version. Kind of afraid of doing it in the middle, but we'll try it here. Yeah, that's actually turning out pretty well, I think. So let's back up a ton of states in the history and see how this looks. Trying to find a good one here. There. So we'll compare that with the new version. And yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Looks much shinier. Let's see. Sorry, there's there are some comments to catch up on. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, a quick sort of summary to catch things up. I'm working on the material colors and kind of painting templates for all weapons in various material types. So I'm just doing this with a sword. So we've got a the randomized system is going to have these tiers of weapons. So we've got the kind of corroded, crappy version of the dirk, a dull, average version of the dirk, a good or sharp version, one with a bit of extra damage, so it's got the serrated edge, and a special kind of highest tier variant. So what I'm doing is taking this kind of base template for the weapons, coloring them, and then I'm going to basically just drag them around, say over here, and choose a set of colors that will work for a different material type. So I was working on the common metal material type, so I'm just going to quickly show you kind of what it would look like if I did a sorry, I've got to deselect here. If I did the Magisteel version of these weapons. So we might not actually use, say, the corroded version of Magisteel, because that would be kind of lame. Like this you've got this ultimate like adamantium-ish metal, and it becomes corroded. What? So some of these may get cut or may just not be used in the randomization. But I'm actually working on a sort of a system to generically apply these color sets to any given weapon that we draw in a new, and like just apply every material type to them. So I would basically make an action that does what I'm doing right now, and kind of fills these colors in automatically for any given material. But first, I've got to choose the colors so that everything looks good. So let's do some kind of nasty green corrosion, just in case we end up using this. Something like that. And then I want to come up with some nice color for the hilts. So we'll try, let's see, I was doing, or actually, sorry, this isn't Magisteel, this is Meteorite. I don't know what I'm thinking. Magisteel's over here. So yeah, let's do some kind of crazy purple color for these. And this is getting applied through an overlay layer. Those look pretty good. So something like that. So when I finalize each of these color sets, that's basically what I'll do. So after I kind of finish painting this, the amazing special version of the blade, which I think I'm basically done with. I may just make a couple tweaks. I'm just going to take this set of weapons and drag them around and dump them on every other material type. You see, I've already got it started, but I didn't do every variant of the blade. I was just doing a dull and a good variant. And after some work on the randomization system today, realized we should probably do 5 different tiers, and might as well do it now because it'll be much harder to do it later. It just takes a tiny bit of extra drawing up front, and then the action takes care of the rest to apply the material to everything. Of course, I've got to make the action first, but okay, so after that summary, let me quickly catch up on the comments again. Let's see. So yeah, we could potentially put particle effects on any given part of the sword. I'm not totally sure if I can confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. I know we will have some emitters, and ideally we can apply a light effects, so make swords glow and throw particles off of them, say if they have a minor magical property attached. So yeah, a weapon with say like a fury blade and a subdue pommel might be possible. Yeah, what I'd like to do is have, at least most melee weapons could have a modifier, which is probably going to be the hilt. Or sorry, the guard, I guess I should say, could swap out for like a fury guard. So every time you whack an enemy, it does a ton of fire damage, and then we might have some other minor attribute that does a little bit of ice damage or something like that as well. Whether we'll have constraints on that, so you can't do fire and ice together, I don't know. But I mean, games like Torchlight do it, so I'm kind of okay with having like dealing fire and ice damage at the same time if you find some crazy amalgamated weapon somewhere in the dungeon. So I'm not actually sure right now what the maximum number of elemental effects would be on any given weapon. I think everyone's asking, it looks like, because of Burrell's UI mockup. And he had 3 elements stubbed in, so that might be the max. I'm not really sure what we're going to end up kind of finalizing in the randomization system. I think 3 elemental effects would actually be kind of insane from a just like player understanding of what kind of damage the weapon is doing. So I would probably cap it at 3 absolute max, but most likely just 1 or possibly 2. So Doomspeaker, could you clarify about the you're asking how it works with overhead animation? I guess I'm not really sure if I understand like which part. Yeah, so the base weapon overhead swing. Yeah, I guess the way I would look at it is, we have a list of weapons, like the list I kind of showed briefly a minute ago, and like probably half an hour ago or more now. And those base weapons like the dirk and short sword and machete and things like that, the kind of base name for the weapon would have the majority of the stats. Like it kind of defines what the weapon is, and then everything else is like slight or possibly major kind of modifications up and down. Is that kind of answering the question? I think. But then I guess if you mean like animation-wise, how the character sort of holds it, we're sort of faking a lot of things. I guess maybe that's what you're asking is like how sort of perspective-wise the sword would look. So if you've got a character like this, and you need to do, say, a swing. The sword actually is going to swing kind of in an arc. So let me modify this a little bit. Well, I got that on the wrong layer. Okay, so the sword would start out like this, and instead of swinging down in kind of an overhead arc with the sword, you're actually going to swing it sort of like this till you're facing forward. So what we're going to do in between, like we can actually scale the sword. So, I mean, it's going to happen so fast you won't notice, but the sword will actually be sort of like squished, something like this, and the blade will sort of stretch out. And that's really just so we can accommodate a very specific collision box. You're not really going to notice the squishing because what we will do is have these motion blur lines in between. That kind of they aren't in the game right now, so it looks kind of like you actually in the game you currently see these kind of multiple frames of where the sword is falling as it moves. But when we add the motion blur, it'll smooth it out and kind of compensate for any of that stuff. So hammers are a more complicated case because you would actually hold a hammer like this. Probably with some perspective, and this is the bottom of the hammer. Basically, you'd hold it up above your head, and then you'd whoosh swing it down. So we're actually going to have to draw the opposite side of the hammer. Like let's say if this had a spike on the back, obviously the spike would now be here. So let's well, let's actually just call this front, and then this is back. So, bam. Okay. So what we will do is probably some kind of trickery where we actually are going to, as you swing the weapon here, we will sort of squish or somehow scale the hammer, and then we basically flip from this state to this one. So I'm going to try to get away with only having two graphics for hammers. So you'd switch to a slightly kind of squished squished on the y-axis version of the hammer that would then stretch out as you swing it. But again, that's going to be completely hidden by having these motion blur lines that come off of the hammer. So you'll really just see this big whoosh, bam. Even though the hammer is there, but all of our manipulations will ideally be hidden. So we haven't gotten to that part yet, but that's the goal. So anything else I missed? So yeah, I'll quickly show the weapon type thing again, and then I should probably hop off the stream because I think my girlfriend needs me to bring her dinner. So, yeah. So here are the weapons again. I know that this is probably kind of hard to read. I'm just skimming through. So, in the categories in orange are the ones that we're more likely to do first. All the other ones are just random ideas that I had when I went to a friend's wedding and was out of town for a few days, and basically just worked because this was like I couldn't really do art half the time because I was on a plane and stuff like that. So I worked on this instead. Just working in Excel, and so and actually a bunch of these were written by Renee, who does a decent bit of our kind of copywriting and editing and creative writing type stuff. So, but I have a lot of fun coming up with these weapon names myself. So I imagine like half of these will get cut, or probably only like 10% will make it into the first version of the game, and maybe we'll add some in expansions. Who knows? And then I've got ideas for other classes even that aren't going to be included. Like we had some way over here somewhere. We've got like winds, string instruments, and percussion, which would all be bard instruments that I had thought up back when we were hoping that everyone would vote on the bard. But yeah, so we will probably add some of these in even though we're not doing the bard right now, just to have a wide variety of instruments and items. But if then in the future we do an expansion and happen to add the bard to the game, we'll probably like double the number of weapons he has available of those specific types. So the orange ones right now are, well, like I was saying, are the ones we're going to emphasize. So I'd like to do a few string instruments. So I had Renee come up with some extra names for them, but we probably won't get to do this many until we actually implement the bard into the game. Maybe someday, hopefully. So anyway. Yeah. So I think the coming up with the weapon naming stuff and the sort of randomization system really kind of scratches my my like super kind of insane like quasi Asperger's itch for just like coming up with gigantic systems and lots of parameters, and I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about RPGs is just like here's this this huge number of weapons and items that all have these like unique effects and so on, and so I guess like when I play games I have the tendency to be kind of a completist collector. It's actually good for me to play games like Torchlight where you can't keep everything and you have to just sell stuff away because it helps me not go crazy just trying to get every weapon. I think when one of my last playthroughs of Final Fantasy Tactics, which this is like probably 10 years ago or something, I think I tried to keep one of every weapon just in case I needed it or something insane like that. I don't really remember now, but I know I at least did something like that with Final Fantasy IX because you actually sort of learned new skills from the weapons themselves, which I think a lot of people hated, but I actually kind of liked. Oops, don't want to fill that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if adding the highlights actually adds that much, but it's kind of nice. Yeah, I think this one probably just shouldn't, well, I guess I've got to use it on that side, huh? Trying to just consolidate highlights and stuff so I'm not painting with as many insane colors. For Vacant Psalm, the witch would actually use death rattles. Well, that's my current idea. Brooms actually isn't a bad idea either. Maybe she could use both. But yeah, I was thinking that, I mean, sort of doing a play on the term death rattle, like she would actually have this kind of like a maraca type of thing, but she would, shake this skulled maraca, whatever it would look like, and cause random effects to enemies. So she would probably swing it and could do some melee damage if enemies are close to her, but then it basically just spawns, random debuff effects or damage to all the nearby enemies as well. Oh yeah, the Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Like I'm not as much of a fan of the Tactics Advance series compared to the original Tactics, but yeah, I do kind of like the using a weapon in order to learn a new skill, because it gives you another reason to collect weapons beyond just, oh, this does one more damage. That gets a little old, but so it's kind of a nice like pro con system, which is something I'd like to do in Delvers when you find new weapons. Is you can't actually kind of tap into their full effects because you don't know what the weapon is yet. So I don't know if this is all kind of like off the record. I don't know if we're going to do it. It's just something we had talked about. So like anytime you pick up a new weapon, potentially sort of blocking out what its full name is. So the whatever the random name is. So the insanely furious destroying hammer of bludgeoning. Whatever. Like half of that would be question marks when you first find one, and then you have to use it, say 10 or 20 or however many times to learn what it actually is and find out what all of its stats are, which is kind of another like I mean the bad thing is like a lot of times these are going to be limited use, and so you might not be able to use one enough to fully kind of figure out what it was. And I don't think we can store all the information that would be required to know, like for every one of the millions of combinations of weapons, what random combinations you've seen and so on. Like that would be so much kind of save data. It would just be insane. But so yeah, I've been trying to figure out like kind of how, what's a good way to do that. And one thing Kobe suggested, which I think is really nice, is just like if you find a tier 1 weapon and you're a level 1, you don't know what it is. Like it appears as question marks until you use it X number of times. But say once you're a level 2 and you find a tier 1 weapon, then you instantly can tell what it is. And I think that's actually a pretty good compromise. So who knows what we'll actually end up doing, but it's one of those extra kind of fluff features that we just tend to argue about in the office. Okay, I should probably just call this done and shut this stream down. So let's wrap up any final questions. I'm going to save this. And poison frogs. Rattle frogs, okay. I actually, that would be kind of cool to just like spawn random critters, nasty plagues and stuff. Well, it's nice that Stickman that the stream was showing up on your front page. I didn't advertise this at all, or well, just said on Twitter, "Hey, live stream right now," basically. So Doomspeaker, yeah, asking if certain classes are more proficient with some weapons that aren't their main weapons, and that's something I would like to introduce, but it adds a significant amount of just like data craziness on our end, so I'm not sure, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense that like a rogue would actually be pretty decent with all melee weapons, but really like suck with wands, and so that say like the wand accuracy goes down, so it shoots in a random direction when you try to use it, or you use it and it shoots a fireball but knocks you backwards into a pit or something like that. So okay, like so rogues can use wands, like sure, but you probably don't want to. I think that it would actually add a lot of depth and kind of uniqueness to like whatever class you're playing as, rather than like wizards can use maces just like everybody else, like that it doesn't quite make sense. But I did want to kind of stick with that every class can use everything. It's just like they may totally suck at it. And the storage suicide type stuff is something that we're still thinking about doing. I think what we will probably do is have a randomly spawning storage room. So Zone 1 will have kind of the storage room, you can dump some stuff in it, and if you die and come back to Zone 1 level 1, and it randomly spawns that room again, it will have whatever you've put in this kind of magical treasure chest, and you can pull it back out of storage. So whether that spawns every time or randomly, like it would at least spawn in a random location, you have to find it, or maybe you have to bomb a wall to find it, or something more interesting like that. That's something I would really like to do. The suicide booth thing, I think what we're probably going to do is just have something in the menu where if you totally get yourself stuck, like you've picked up every item you need, but you throw all of those items into a pit because you're dumb and then can't complete the level. Like basically we can't completely like prevent players from getting themselves stuck. It's probably just not going to be possible. So we'll probably have a menu option where you have a merc vial that you can drink to essentially kill yourself and spawn a new character. So that was the last thing I remember us talking about. I'm going to be doing more streams. I'll probably do a couple a week or something like that. I'm going to try to get work done as I do them. So sometimes I may not talk, I may just work. But for this first one, I wanted to do some commentary. So I don't know. Maybe might just do another one tomorrow. Whatever I'm painting, just rent it for an hour and not talk. If anyone asks questions, I will just say I'm not answering. So the game is Delver's Drop. Oh, it looks like everybody's answering. Okay, awesome. Sorry, I'm also on a bit of a delay, I'm sure you realize. So whenever you hear me, it's several seconds later. Chris Guest, I like the this Baroque mechanic with the storage receptacle, so you can just send one item up. Plot important items. So, well, we're not going to have any or too many of those. Or at least they'll be optional. So that's probably something we could do. Something kind of similar. So I don't know if if the storage room would be a universal single storage room or if it would be per level. Kind of like the idea of it being per level. So if you stored a really cool item on level 1, you actually have to replay it and then go deeper after you kind of go back to retrieve it. But who knows? Stickman, also, if you came in late, I think these go up later and you can view them from the beginning. So we have some kind of automatic posting to YouTube some way as well. Burrell has done the work on that. I don't actually know how all that stuff functions. So, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. So thanks everyone for showing up, all 30 odd of you, and we'll probably do one of these soon. So, and yeah, Twitch storing them. I've never gone back to view any of them, so I'm not sure what that interface looks like for any of you. But okay, talk to you guys later.